Welcome back to the On Adventure podcast. I'm Josh Self and I'll be your host. This is a podcast about adventure, but it's not just the adrenaline story that I'm going for. I want to discover what we find when we push past our limits, and that's what all these conversations are about. I'm super excited to be starting season 2 of the podcast, and really excited because I got a special guest with me today, my son Eli. I'm loving that I get to start season 2 with Eli's story because it was a blast to record it with him. He's wise beyond his years, but you're about to find out that that didn't just happen. I'm super proud of him, and I hope you enjoy this. All right, Eli Self, welcome to the On Adventure podcast.
Thank you. Glad to be here. This is new for me, so I'm excited
to. You've never done a podcast before? You've never done a podcast before?
I've not, much to your shock, I'm sure. Yeah, so this is new for me. I'm excited to see
You've got a good radio voice, and
Stop.
It's better than having a radio face.
Yeah,
right?
True.
So anybody listening will recognize that your last name is the same as mine, and they will not know that your name that you go by, Eli, is my middle name because you're a junior.
Correct.
My eldest son is sitting here with me. Give all the credit to your mom for this idea, which I think is a great idea for us to sit down. And obviously, I know everything that's happened in your life, but it'll be cool to talk through this in the context of adventure and how you see adventure in your life and what that means to you. So let's jump into it.
Yeah.
And
we'll
see where it goes.
Of course. Yeah. Let's do it.
All right. So for anybody listening, why don't you tell them who you are, where you're from, where you're born, and what are you doing right now?
I was born in Raleigh at Old Wake Med on one fateful, afternoon?
It was a long day.
On one fateful day in April 2004, the 28th to be exact. Yeah, I've lived in Raleigh for, I want to say 14, 15 years.
How old does that make you?
I'm 19 years old.
19 years old.
I'm a few months away from turning 20.
And 4 of those 19 years, we lived where?
We lived in Franklin, Tennessee, south of Nashville.
Right. Every other year, you've
been in Raleigh. Yes. Currently, I'm a sophomore at UNC Chapel Hill. Go Heels.
Go Heels.
I'm studying sports administration and looking to get my minor in history as well. And then I got to tack on another major and minor. So we'll see. We'll see what happens there. But for now, that's what I'm going with.
I'll give you a little kudos too, because you can tack on another major and minor because you went into college with almost a full semester's worth of credit because of all the work that you did in high school.
Yes. AP classes, while they are hard, definitely help you out on the back end of things. But yeah, it's a good segue. I graduated from high school at Trinity Academy of Raleigh in North Raleigh, close to where we live.
And what year are you in Chapel Hill?
Sophomore. Second year. Just finished my third semester overall. So I'm halfway to being a junior, I guess, if you want to look at it like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so just living life, doing the college thing, and trying not to go in debt, I guess.
I've got a few questions for you on the college stuff that we'll get to in a minute. Okay. But what folks listening may not know is you're the first, the oldest.
The elder statesman.
The elder statesman. What has that been like for you to be the oldest in a fairly big family?
It's been fun because, I don't know, I was kind of the guinea pig for a little bit.
Sure, I'll admit to that.
So that was fun in some ways. In other ways, it was not because, I feel like there's a lot of responsibility on my shoulders. Being the eldest of 3 and kind of having to be the leader of the pack, the 4 of us, I guess. And like looking back, I'm like, there's some stuff that my sister got away with that I'm definitely would not have been able to get away with. Which, like, that's kind of classic sibling banter. Yep. So, like, I don't take it to mean anything other than just, like, that's how siblings are.
Yeah, there's no question we were figuring it out on you.
Yeah, which is fine. Yeah. We were all young.
Yeah, that's true.
But, yeah, it was fun. A little bit of responsibility. A lot of responsibility. But still fun. We had a fun household. It was definitely different than your average household. I guess you could say that about any family, but I feel like ours was a bit further from the average than...
Yep, for sure.
Than some of my friends, I guess, to use that example. Yeah. Fun, exciting, a lot of responsibility.
So was it a big change then to leave a big family house and go to college? Was it a big shift from what you felt with independence or activities or things that you get to do every day?
I think it was like I still had that responsibility. It was just kind of a different thing because I wasn't in the house. So it was kind of just like leaving the house, finding things to do with my time because I had more free time. Because I wasn't doing school and sports for, I guess, almost like 12 hours a day. So I just had to find stuff to do with my time.
You're saying that's what high school was?
That's what high school
12
was.
hours. It was structured. You went to school, had it.
Well, yeah,
every day.
school's a lot structured. You were there from, I don't even remember, it was like 8 to 3, and then I'd have soccer, baseball practice until almost 5:30, and then I'd go home for dinner and do homework. And so my days were really, really structured in high school, and then going off to college, it was just kind of like, to a degree, like your day is kind of what you make it. And so that's led to me trying a lot of fun things in college, like putting myself in different like ministries or clubs or whatever. But it's also kind of led to a lot of like burnout just because I've tried to do a little bit too much of that. But I guess in terms, to answer your question, it's just different responsibilities. And like, I don't know, there's not as much like responsibility for me to be a leader because I put myself, or I was fortunate enough to have leadership positions in high school, whether it be like team captain or what have you. I didn't have that. And I was just kind of another fish in the sea in college. Whereas at home, I was like the leader of the kids and like had to, you know what I mean? Like I
do. Yeah. You fit the mold pretty classically of the first child syndrome, which either by choice or by nature, you end up finding yourself at the tip of the spear. From a leadership standpoint with your siblings, everybody looks to you because you've been there, done that kind of thing. In school, that leadership capabilities always came out, and you always floated to the top where people look to Eli to do this or that, whether it's team captain or school president or a variety of the things that you got asked to do. All of them great honors and privileges, but a lot of responsibility.
Sure. Yes.
So shifting to college, a lot of that expectation, it seems, wasn't necessarily there out of the gate. So are you saying that was a relief, or you were trying to fill that space with things that you wanted to do?
Well, I think part of it too is just like it was a new community. So like I still potentially have the opportunity to hold similar leadership positions in the communities that I've been in for almost 2 years now in Chapel Hill. It was just in high school, I'd been going to I went to Trinity for 5 years by the time I graduated. So I'd been seeing the same people for 4 years before my senior year, and then like being a friend and on the field like a leader to a lot of guys specifically just for the greater part of 4 years. So I don't know, just relationships going on that long. Like there's kind of like an innate respect that you earn.
Yeah.
Especially from like, to a degree, like I'm thinking on the soccer field, for an example, like I kind of put myself in that position where I played goalkeeper for those listening. And I was a very vocal goalkeeper. So I feel like just in me being vocal, trying to organize the defense, that kind of put me in a position of leadership where I was leading guys. I didn't do it because I wanted to like be team captain. I did it because I wanted to win. Yeah. And it just kind of like was
and your teammates knew that you were doing it for their benefit as well as yours. It was about the team. It wasn't about Eli, and you cared about your teammates. Yeah. And they responded out of that. So,
so I guess to apply that to college, I don't know. It was a relief because it was like, okay, I kind of have freedom without responsibility, but also it's just kind of in my nature, I guess. Like I try to have a growth mindset, but I feel like there's some things that like it's in my nature that like the further along I get with these relationships that I made starting freshman year in college, by the time I'm a senior, it's going to be in a similar spot that I was in my senior year of high school, if that makes sense. Like it's just, I feel like the relationships are different looking at it from right now, but I think in a couple years it'll be in a similar spot just because that's how I am.
Yep.
I guess.
Fast forward several years, it's probably going to play out the same way when you get into post-college adulthood. And, you know, a lot of times leaders float to the top. You know, there's a nature part of it that you just can't help yourself. Yeah. The challenge to that is figuring out when to say yes to those things, not giving everything. You know, I've talked a lot about that recently. It took me several extra decades to figure that out. So hopefully you process that a little bit quicker than I did. But your parents definitely see that in you, that there's just a nature part of it that people respect you, and that's come out. So one of the questions that I thought would be fun to see how you answered is, if you had to summarize your life story up to this point, and you can do this any way that you want to, literally, figuratively, metaphysically, like
that's a big word,
any creative way you want to describe your life story from 0 to almost 20, how would you do that?
That is a good question. You sent me the list of questions, and I saw that at the top, and I was like, that is a good question. So there are two analogies that kind of popped into my mind when, like I said, you would send me the questions beforehand, or some of the questions, I guess. One of the analogies is kind of describing like things I've done, positive or negative, to kind of influence the last 19 and a half years. And then the first analogy that I'll get to is kind of like things that happened to me, I guess, kind of out of my control.
All right, go for it.
The first one I imagine as like we both are sports nerds. I'm quite literally studying sports as like a 4-year degree.
Mm-hmm.
So of course, the first thing that pops in my mind is something that has to do with sports.
Makes sense.
So I imagine it as like a track race where I'm just like lined up against people that I view as my peers or just other people. And the starter's gun goes off, and I just like, there's something that's holding me back for like 2 seconds. Like, it's like, for anyone that knows track, 2 seconds is a very long time in track. And kind of going along with the saying that life's a marathon, not a sprint, I imagine it as like a marathon around a track, like something you'd see in the Olympics, like a 3,000 meter. But just like, we're all, the people that are next to me are kind of running the race of life, but I had to like take a 2 second, like everyone else got a 2-second head start on me because of stuff that happened where like I mentioned earlier, like our home life is different than like further from the average than other people.
So explain that. I know what you mean by that, but
okay.
Explain what you mean.
Without going into like a crazy amount of detail, because we could, my brother and adopted sister have what's called Prader-Willi syndrome, which is a neurological genetic.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It's a genetic disorder where it causes a lot of different things. The main thing that happens is there's a disconnect between their brain and their stomach. So they are quite literally always hungry and never really satisfied in terms of like food. And as we all do when we're hungry, like they can get hangry or whatever.
Behaviors.
Yeah, there's some behavioral issues as well that I would say kind of stem from the hunger, but it's kind of, I don't know, just a unique set of challenges.
And it's 24/7.
Yes, it's 24/7.
It doesn't go away. It doesn't slow down.
Correct.
It doesn't ebb and flow. It's always there.
So living with my brother and my adopted sister for 19 and a half, 20 years, it's presented a unique set of challenges for me and for my parents, and obviously for my brother and adopted sister as well. They're some of the most resilient people that I've ever been around. So like, there's definitely a unique set of challenges that come with being a sibling to not one, but two special needs children.
Yeah. So how is it hard for you to, having grown up with that, and then make the effort to go into school or go into sports around quote unquote typical kids that don't have that in their household?
Yeah.
But you're expected to function and behave and perform like your peers. How has that been challenging to you to?
Yeah. So that like 2-second head start that I was mentioning is just kind of like, there's some social skills that just aren't there. I'm thinking of my brother specifically, like love him to death. There are some social skills that just aren't there because of Prader-Willi syndrome. So growing up, especially like when I was going through puberty and when he was going through puberty, like for reference, we're 20 months apart, 22 months.
Like that.
So like, obviously there's this big brother, little brother dynamic, but as we were both kind of growing up, I would start to pick up on some like social cues, and he's just like, they'd go right over his head. And that would be really frustrating for me. And there's some little stuff that he would do or like he wouldn't do, or stuff that he would say, just like him asking questions over and over again, stuff like that, where it would just be like very minute little things that would eventually build up because, I don't know, I just didn't deal with it. So it kind of forced me to have a lot of patience. And kind of another thing is just, it's hard. It is hard. It was hard for me to like welcome people into my home. I'm a very extroverted person. It's like, I want to hang out with people. I want to have guys over to play pool and just talk with, you know what I mean? Just have a chat with the boys, you know what I mean? But it's hard to do that sometimes because there's just a way of life that we have where like,
just on edge if somebody's.
Yeah, but also just like having the pantry locked, like having a code for that, just like very little stuff that people can, like people notice.
Yep.
It's like, why do you do things this way? And I have to kind of explain. And then I found this a lot in college. I didn't have to deal with it since like 8th grade when we moved back to Raleigh. But then going off to college, I would like introduce myself, how old I am, what year I am, where I'm from, stuff like that. And then like as some of those relationships got a little deeper, it's like, okay, what's your home life look like? Like, do you have any siblings? And normally when people ask how many siblings you have, it's like, oh, I have two sisters and a brother.
Mhm.
But with me, it's like, well, I have two sisters and a brother. One sister's adopted from South Korea, and two of my siblings have special needs. And it's just this whole conversation, like, oh, what kind of special needs?
Mhm.
And it's just like, it just keeps going on, which like, it's not a burden on me. Like, I love telling people about that because it's a very unique part of my upbringing.
But it's not an easy, short conversation either.
No, not at all. It's a very lengthy, like, kind of tough conversation because if people want to get to know me, they're like, oh, how did that affect you? And then it's just like this whole.
Yeah. It's emotionally draining to have to tell that over and over again.
Yeah. It's already emotionally draining to repeat oh, my name is Eli. I'm a sport admin major from Raleigh, North Carolina. 20 times a week, every week for the first 4 weeks of school. Yeah. But to add on to that, like having to explain my family dynamic to 15 people every day, it is.
So I think I get where you're going, where you're tying this in, but in your words, how does all of that relate to a 2-second head start, or you're delayed by 2 seconds for all your peers?
Well, it's just kind of like touched at earlier. It's just like a lot of little things that kind of build up to become what's a pretty hearty difference between my first 19 years on Earth and my friend's first 19 years on Earth, where one, living in a house with 4 kids is already pretty chaotic, but to add into that, one, an adopted sibling, and then 2 siblings with special needs, that just gets even more chaotic. And like, there's a lot of needs that they have that take up a lot of you and mom's energy. I'm sure finances, which like I'm blessed to not have to worry about that as much as some other people, but like there's just some little things where like my whole childhood, Hudson and Lily would take the brunt of y'all's energy. And me and Mimi, my other sister, we've kind of had to sit in the background to a degree because we know that like we don't need as much care as they do. So I don't know, just kind of having to like be a leader, but also like know that there are times when I have to be in the background. And then also, like I was talking about, like just living with someone with special needs can be pretty tough. So I would say that that's probably the 2-second head start. And then, yeah, I'd say that quite honestly, moving to Nashville and then within a few years moving back to Raleigh was also not easy just because I had to make new friends in Nashville. And then as soon as those relationships started to get a little bit deeper, I was like, oh, sorry, I got to go back to Raleigh, which obviously there were outstanding circumstances. So like, it wasn't like our move didn't center around my friendships.
Oh, but it's still hard.
It's still hard. It's so hard.
Empathize with that because of the way we moved around when I was growing up and having that ripped out from underneath you right when you feel like you're getting settled. It's heart wrenching. It makes me sad to hear you verbalize that because I knew that was going to be the case. And like you pointed out, there's a lot of other factors that went into that decision, but it doesn't make that any more difficult to know that it had an impact on you. So that's part of the, and I get that. I mean, you went into a school where some of these kids had been together since kindergarten.
Yes. So a lot of inside jokes went over my head. A lot of, oh, you didn't know that their family dynamic was like this? It's like, no, I didn't know that their family was like this.
I just showed up.
I met them 2 days ago. I don't know intimate details about their family.
Yeah, that's
sorry.
Very difficult.
Yeah. So that's one analogy. Which is kind of about things that happened to me.
Okay. So you had a 2-second head start, but you're in the race right now at almost 20 years old.
Yes.
And would you say you're still, in your mind, are you still catching up? Have you leveled up with your peers? Have you pulled ahead?
I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know. There's a part of me that like kind of wants to have a chip on my shoulder. It's like I'm still kind of falling behind.
Yeah.
I would like to think that I've caught up a little bit. I don't know. I think that the next 2.5 years are kind of pivotal in answering that question. And I would like to think that the race is far from over. So and there's a lot of,
for what it's worth, as your dad looking on the inside of all of this, there's so many ways you've pulled way ahead. There's so many ways because of all the things you just mentioned. You're an old soul that has had to deal with adult type things for a long, long time, probably too fast and too soon. And that's going to help you in some ways. You've become an incredibly resilient person because of that. You're a great leader because of that, because you have empathy for what people are going through. But I completely understand it feels like a weight sometimes too, that you're having to run this race with a 20-pound weight around your leg when everybody else is running free. And even with that, I would say you absolutely have pulled even with your peers, and in a lot of ways are far, far ahead of where I see a lot of your friends at 19, 20 years old. So I'm interested to hear what the second analogy is.
Yeah. The second analogy is kind of more along the lines of like things that I've done, like I said earlier, positive or negative. This analogy was given to me by one of my teachers in high school. He was a history, ethics, and I had a class called leadership with him as well. Mr. Horner at Trinity. Shout out to him.
Shout out to Mr. Horner.
As well as all of my other teachers. I can't say enough good things about all my teachers at Trinity. But he gave us the analogy. I think it was either in ethics class or in AP European history, because he like correlated, like he was explaining like the David statue, Michelangelo.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was in ethics, now that I say that. But he was just saying like the beginning of our life, like each person's, like, I guess you could say the soul starts as like a block of marble. Like Michelangelo started out the David as a big block of marble, but Michelangelo was able to like sculpt the David, this beautiful masterpiece, out of just a marble block. So he used that analogy to say that depending on what you believe, you or God is kind of sculpting your soul in a way that the goal is to end up with the David.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are fortunate enough to get there. Some people aren't. So my analogy is that I have the sculptor's tools, the hammer and the chisel, I guess, and I'm kind of sculpting this thing out. And God is in the back. It's kind of like a apprenticeship kind of. Anyways, it's like an apprentice where he's kind of like back there, like telling me what to do, like trying to help me. And he just like keeps suggesting things, and I'm like, I think I may do it my own way. I think this way may be better than what you're suggesting, and I just do it. And I get to a certain point, I'm like, okay, maybe you were right. And then I try to like fix it. It's just that kind of cycle over and over where he's like, you should probably do it this way. And I'm like, I think this way might be a little bit better, like this other way. And then I do it. And I'm like, wait, I think your way was probably better. And then that kind of thing where there's this kind of constant struggle between like what I want to do, which sometimes lines up with like God's plan, but sometimes it doesn't. So yeah, so that's kind of things that was kind of vague, but
I like that. I love that analogy. And so if you started with, April 28th, 2004, you were just a block of stone. How far into the sculpture are you at this?
I don't know. There's probably a human looking form.
You see a shape.
You can see the shape, but not a whole lot of like, it's not super detailed.
That's interesting.
But
that means there's a lot you still see as potential to figure out.
Yeah. Like I hope that I haven't hit my peak yet.
It's all downhill from.
I hope not. That's kind of where the detail comes in, is like, as I get to my peak, which probably around 27, 30 years or however old, that's when you like start to see more detail. Yeah. And then like, if you're looking in terms of the soul, it'll probably be at its peak, like at its finest detail, like a lot later in life. And there's something to be said too, is like, it's not just God that's back there telling me to do stuff. Like it's also you and mom that are back there. It's like, you should probably do it this way. Like you probably shouldn't say yes to 4 6-hour commitments in a day, because like that's all your 24 hours. You got to do some other stuff, which is kind of what you were getting at earlier. Is just like parents' advice. That's also something that would add detail to that sculpture to go along with the analogy. Or like my soccer coach or my baseball coaches or stuff like that. Just like advice or wisdom that gets given to me, or people that pour into me that help kind of add detail to that sculpture.
I think one of your most helpful qualities that will be helpful to you is, while you are stubborn, and you get that very honestly, you're willing to like listen to advice. And those two don't normally go together. But as a combo, that seems pretty powerful. You know, if you need to be stubborn and kind of like a dog on a bone, stick to something to get the job done, you're going to do it.
Yeah. Sure.
But you're willing to have somebody say, you know what? You're going to hurt yourself if you keep chewing on that bone. You stop and go, oh, okay, I'll try it some other way. And that's a really, really good quality, to have the humility to be able to stop and do that. Have you ever heard use the description of a sculptor creating a statue out of a block? So it's basically chiseling away to find the beauty inside. Have you ever heard that compared to a painter starting with a blank canvas?
It's kind of the same concept. It's just kind of
it's different though, because the painter is starting with a blank piece of paper and they're creating something from nothing out of their own mind. They're putting it on the canvas, and that becomes the end result. Is what the painter comes up with and puts on the canvas. The sculptor, the beauty's already there. It's just a matter of finding it. And really, there's a difference, kind of Eastern and Western thought in those two concepts. Where, kind of the intellectualism turns you into something that maybe you didn't start with. That's the painter.
Yeah, it's kind of like the blank slate theory, which gets into some theology a little bit.
Yeah. But so I like the sculptor, like a philosophy and thought, much more than a painter starting with a blank canvas.
Yeah, like you got to chisel away all this stuff that you're like, I hear it, but it's bad advice. You know what I mean?
And you don't have to be somebody that you're not. That to me, that's what the painting is that I'm creating something that somebody else is going to think is beautiful.
Yeah.
The sculptor is finding the beauty that's already there.
Exactly.
So I love that you use that analogy.
Yeah. Shout out to Mr. Horner.
Mr. Horner. We'll give him some props on that one.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So you've covered some of this, and I don't want to skip over too much, but let's just kind of hit on high school one more. What was your favorite thing about high school? What did you enjoy the most?
Like I said earlier, all of my teachers were great. I love Trinity. But I would say the thing that I remember from high school the most, it's the people, really, which like I was in a classroom with them. But I would say that the most valuable memories from high school were made outside the classroom. And obviously, like I learned a ton at Trinity. But like some of the soccer games and baseball games and basketball games and like late nights sitting around a bonfire with people and like some of the class trips that we went on or some of the class trips that we didn't go on that we reminisce about what may have happened if COVID didn't hit.
Posed with COVID.
Yeah. So just stuff like that where like even people that weren't there through all of my 5 years, like I still go back and I'm like, remember that trip in 8th grade we took to DC, or remember the time we were fortunate enough to go overseas and this really cool thing happened, or remember that one soccer game where we won in the tournament and penalty shootout and knocked out, just stuff like that. The knowledge that I learned in the classroom is always going to be there. But like in my mind, I'm not like, remember that one lesson we had, Archimedes' principle and buoyancy? I know that stuff. Like I understand the principle, but to answer your question succinctly, the thing that I remember most from high school is the people and the memories that I created with those people. And like I was hanging out with those people earlier today. It's just that same concept of relationships kind of continuing, even though that my best friend's at Liberty in Lynchburg and I'm in Chapel Hill.
Yeah. To some extent, you guys can pick up after time apart and not miss a beat.
Yeah. It's just kind of like we dab each other up, sit down. How's life? Catch me up on what happened the last 6 months. And then we're same page. Just go from there.
Yeah. But at the same time, you both are kind of heading in a different trajectory on your own campuses with your own degrees and new friend groups. What have you enjoyed the most about UNC Chapel Hill? And at the same time, what's been the most challenging? And I'm going to use this to, as everybody listening knows, this is a podcast about adventure. Yes. And I think this question is a good jumping off point about how adventure plays in your life.
Yes. So again, I'd say the best thing about Chapel Hill so far is the people and the memories that I made with those people. But I guess the most challenging part is figuring out what to say no to, because there's a lot of stuff that you're like, man, if I had the time, I would be all in on that. Or like you say yes something and then you're like, wait, I don't have enough time in the day to do school and this thing. So the memories, the people, 10 out of 10, 11 out of 10, even, just amazing. But there's so much to do in Chapel Hill that you can't possibly do all of it. And I want to try to do everything. Like if something sounds fun, I'm like, oh, I want to do that. But you just like, I don't have unlimited hours in the day. Still get a decent amount of sleep and do my homework and do well in school and don't want to fill my time.
You are a yes man for fun. So if something seems fun,
yes, I am.
You're going to dive head first and ask questions later.
Correct.
And that's not bad either. It's gotten you into some burnout and stress situations, but you're learning from that. And
also got me into some pretty fun situations.
Absolutely. All right. So I think that's a good springboard into what I like to talk about around adventure in these conversations, which is, why do normal people find things to intentionally push themselves to a limit and then go beyond that limit to find what they can discover about themselves on the other side of it. So I'm going to ask you some questions about things that you've done up to this point, but if you could pick maybe like one of the biggest challenges you've ever had to overcome, it could be spiritual, physical, emotional, anything. What would you say is the biggest challenge that you've had to overcome?
Kind of going back to my analogy, is kind of trying to find ways to make up for that 2-second head start.
Mm-hmm.
So when we moved, the challenge was making friends, making those relationships, and then like deepening them, which thankfully I've been able to kind of overcome that challenge at kind of each point where it's come up. And I would attribute that to, I mean, some of it's a willingness on my friend's part to just be kind of like, yeah, sure, you can be my friend. Like, we'll hang out. And then like it kind of goes from there.
Yeah,
But
it takes
just
a
like,
level of vulnerability on both parties to leave the door open long enough for that to happen.
For sure. That's definitely been a big challenge. And then like we were just talking about, like realizing that I only have 24 hours in each day and I only have 7 days in each week. And I only have 52 weeks in a year, and finding ways to fill that time, but not fill too much of it.
Yeah. And I think that's where I've seen you try to, like all the things you say yes to, I think you view as an adventure of one sort or another. Like you don't know how it's going to play out. You don't know how it's going to end. You just know that it seems fun and let's give it a try.
Yeah.
And
give the old college try.
Yep. So not putting words in your mouth, but when I say adventure, and you hear me say that all the time, but how would you describe adventure? What comes to your mind when you hear adventure?
What comes to mind is our hiking trips.
Okay. I hoped you would go there.
Yeah. Well, we're going there. I think it was like the first or the second one that we went on. I want to say it was in Georgia. It was Georgia, or it was Grayson Highlands in Virginia.
That was the first.
So one of the first two.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember like, which one was the one where we like got out of the car and immediately had to like hike up this incredible, like very steep hill?
Actually, both of them, but I think you're describing Georgia.
Okay, maybe I am.
At Blood Mountain. And for anybody listening, he's talking about two different sections of the Appalachian Trail.
Yes. The AT.
That I thought, as a dad with a 9 or 10-year-old son, I think that's how old you were at the time.
Yes. Yeah, that's right.
Man, that'd be cool to get him out on a trail and do some backpacking. But at the time, I had never hiked a foot on the Appalachian Trail. And now what I know about it is a rugged, difficult trail at every step of the way. And I had no idea what we were getting into. But I also knew that it was going to be difficult, and I wanted you to do something hard.
Yeah. And it was difficult. And
you were a 9 or 10-year-old boy carrying your own backpack, crossing adults on the trail, and they're going, "Oh my gosh, how many days are you out here?" And you did it. You got to the end of it. And I think that the times that we've done that has given you kind of a grounded weightiness that I can do hard things. Like I'm not scared of hard things, even if it's really scary. So continue what you were saying. The first one where we stepped out of the car, we were actually at about mile marker 30 of the Appalachian Trail in Georgia, and we were hiking backwards, trying to get to the terminus at Springer Mountain, which was 30 miles
south.
We were heading south.
Okay.
And so we started around a peak called Blood Mountain. Our goal was to get to the terminus at Amicalola Falls, which is where the parking lot is. So what comes to mind when you say that?
It doesn't even have to do with like that crazy like hill. It was just like there's a point on that trip where we like came out and there's this beautiful mountainside with like wavy grass, and it was like it wasn't grass, it was like the golden stuff, but it wasn't like wheat. But you know what it's called.
I know.
I don't know what it's called. It's escaping me right now. But it was just like I still think about that a decade later because it was just so beautiful. There's just like
you climbed this, difficult,
and then we got out and you could see this whole thing, and I was like, oh my gosh. Then it just kind of clicked. It was like, okay, this is why people do this. That's what comes to mind when I think adventure. Is that like first moment where it kind of clicked? It's like, okay, this is why people do hard things, like hike 30 miles on the Appalachian Trail, because you can see stuff like this from like you can look at the world from a vantage point that like very few people relatively. That's what comes to mind when I think of
so
adventure.
You get to have an experience that, like, if you took the percentage of people that have seen that vista as a percentage of the entire world population,
it's very small.
It's minuscule. And you got to experience that because you chose to do the hard thing, which is to climb up the backside of Blood Mountain in June.
Yeah. It was hot.
It was brutal. You may not remember this. We got to the top and our backpacking friend, Mr. Black, almost stepped on a rattlesnake.
I do remember that.
Sunbathing at the top of the mountain.
Yep.
That was the first omen that trip was not going to go.
Oh, yeah.
Good. So you were kind of hooked on that early. You were relatively young and you've taken a few trips since then. But I think that's an interesting take that you got from your adventure is that you had pushed through. Do you remember specifically on any of these having points where you've wondered whether you could finish?
Not really, just because, especially after that first trip, I was like, okay, I can kind of do this thing. But I laugh just because I think it's funny. But like there was an element of like survival where it's like we're stuck in the woods. Obviously, like there wasn't an immediate threat on our life by any stretch of the imagination, but it was just kind of like, if I don't get through this, like I'm just kind of in the middle of the woods. Mm-hmm. I was like, I'd like a home cooked meal, so I'm gonna walk a little bit, so I'm gonna finish it. You know what I mean? It was just kind of like life would be a lot harder if I didn't finish this thing.
Kind of the same idea, short-term pain for long-term gain.
Yeah, kind of that same concept, just because.
Do you think that the fact that you've done something hard like certain sections of the Appalachian Trail has that helped you in other places in your life?
I don't know. I haven't thought about that.
Well, now you will, since I asked it.
Yeah, now I will.
Was there any? Can you remember any specific moments where you literally were scared?
Well, you mentioned earlier the second omen that trip. Well, it wasn't really an omen. It was just like that trip didn't go well. Mr. Black, he got stung by a yellow jacket, and that was when we found out that he was allergic to them. And as I'm sure everyone can assume, didn't end well.
He's still alive.
Thank the Lord.
What do you remember seeing when we stopped and turned around the first time after?
I don't even remember. I just remember like sitting in my tent in the woods and like
that far down the trail.
Yeah. I mean, I just remember sitting in my tent in the woods and then just like knowing that there was just an incredible amount of chaos going on between like you trying to figure out the situation and then like him going through like, I think it was anaphylactic shock.
Close. Yeah.
Something adjacent to it, I guess.
Yep. But you're missing about 2 or 3 hours from the time that he got stung to the time we got to a point where I set up the tents and he fell asleep, where I wasn't sure that he was going to make it. And in fact, if you hadn't had allergies, I wouldn't have been carrying Benadryl with me.
Yeah.
And the little swig of Benadryl that I gave him took the edge off of all the allergic reaction that he was having. I mean, his face was swollen. He couldn't breathe. His heart was racing. He was vomiting. I mean, it was all the stuff, and it wasn't stopping. And we had no cell phone coverage. And for some reason, where we were, there weren't people crossing us on the trail. And so the sun was going down, and all of this is breaking loose. And there were moments where I thought, we're going to sit here and watch this guy die, and I couldn't do anything about that. And so I think it's interesting that your first memory is on the backside of that when we gotten down the hill a little bit and set up the tent, and he fell asleep for 12 hours. But that was scary.
Yes.
And that section,
I remember it being scary, like the emotions of it. I don't really remember like any like vivid pictures. I just remember like kind of the emotions of it.
That's certainly how the brain works. And where we were is actually so remote. It's a part of northern Georgia where the Army Rangers train.
Oh, wow.
So it's very rugged, very not close to anything.
Sure.
And so
cards were really stacked against us. Oh my gosh.
It was a scary moment for sure. But ever since then, I'd carry the Garmin.
Benadryl. Oh yeah.
I don't carry Benadryl unless you're with me, but he's supposed to have an EpiPen from now on. But I've got that Garmin tool that, if we get into trouble, I can hit SOS, and anywhere, even without cell coverage, it'll pick up a satellite.
That's incredible.
So I think those are like, when I think about as you've grown up, doing hard things like that and seeing a really scary moment where you remember the emotions of it, even if you don't remember the specific details of the event, that builds a level of, can't think of another word other than resilient.
Yeah.
I've been in the middle of something really, really difficult, something really out of control, and I made it to the other side. And all the people that I've talked to on this podcast that do adventure, that pursue challenging things, it's in the unknown the fact that they don't know how the challenge is going to come out, that they learn most of the things that they learn from challenging themselves. I think it's cool that you've had that early in your life to where now I see you doing that just naturally, whether it's the classes that you take, taking the harder ones instead of just easy ones, or athletic things that you've done, doing something hard rather than taking the easy route, and still going backpacking. We did that a year ago and got to McAfee Knob, one of the best pictures we've ever taken on the side of that mountain.
That was cool.
Yeah, if you'd given up after age 9 or 10 and said, this stuff's too hard, we never would have gotten to do that.
Yeah.
So that's what I love about hearing adventure stories, is the places that it takes people that without pursuing adventure, they never would get.
Yeah.
So I hope, I can't make any of this happen for you, but I hope that you keep that as part of your DNA.
I do too.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Not to cut you off. Yeah,
you can cut me off all you want. I think a good way to wrap this up is, and kind of in that same thought, as you think over the next 10 years, I mean, almost 20 to 30, and I'm going to steal this from somebody. I didn't make this up, but that's a time frame that some people call the warrior phase of a man's life. Like, it's where you've got
a lot can happen.
A lot can happen. You're at kind of a physical peak. You're at an intellectual kind of launching pad for the rest of your life. And a lot of things come together where you're ready to take on the world.
Yeah.
Those are the times to really challenge, pursue failure, because failure's not bad. It just teaches you something. So as you think about this warrior phase, what comes to mind? What do you imagine for your 20s?
I don't know.
What ways do you want to push and challenge yourself? What do you think of it in terms of that?
Well, I guess in the immediate future, I was going to try to come up with some quip about like how the immediate future impacts going to the gym more and like pushing myself in that, just like going frequently, like you were saying, pursuing failure.
That's a short-term goal.
Yeah, that's short-term.
I think mid-range or even longer term, where do you see trying to be intentional with hard things? Where do you see that playing?
Probably more backpacking trips, trying to find I guess almost like shooting out of my league for like jobs, I guess, like trying to just like put my name out there. Because I think in the sports industry specifically, it's kind of like who you know. And I know that's a very like overused kind of corny phrase, but it's true. Like there's a reason that it's corny, is because it's so true. And so like just being able and like being bold enough to put my name out there and just like, hey, I'm Eli, and kind of furthering those connections that I make, and just like saying like, oh, like going back a year later after I meet whoever, saying, oh, I heard you got a job available. I'd love to interview for it. That kind of thing. Just
being bold and
making connections, and like being bold and using those connections.
Do you have any, you said doing more backpacking trips. Are there any places in the US or the world that you want to do a backpacking trip?
Probably somewhere in Europe, whether it be like Scotland, like in the actual highlands.
The
Highlands, or maybe the Alps, which that'd be really tough, but it'd be a lot of fun. I mean, if I get advanced enough, Nepal, that's a very lengthy goal, but I got 10 years for the question. So
and some people think Nepal and think I got to hike Mount Everest, but there's a lot of people that will actually just hike base camp.
Yeah, it's base camp,
which is very high in elevation, and it's a long trek.
That's still not easy.
It's not easy.
It's very hard.
The scenery is out of this world.
Yeah.
That would be a cool.
I mean, there's at least like one or two places on each continent that I could name, just like going up to Alaska, or like going out west to Moab or something like that, or going down to the Patagonia Mountains in, was that Argentina, or like Mount Kilimanjaro or something like that in Africa. And then you've got tons of stuff in New Zealand.
Seems endless, doesn't it?
Yeah, there's so much natural beauty in the world I want to explore. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
To go back to your original question, I'm trying to think like if it kind of physically, if it like job, kind of along the same veins, like being bold with girls, I guess. I know that's pretty.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. All of those it takes a level of vulnerability.
Yeah. Like
to try something that you don't know how the outcome is going to end.
Being bold enough to be vulnerable, and then also being vulnerable enough to be bold, I guess.
That's very good.
There's a $5 phrase for you, I guess.
Yep. All right.
Okay, let's do it. To answer your question, that's kind of what I envision the next 10 years. Specifics, I have no idea about specifics.
I feel like you have a trajectory. You have a direction, and you'll figure the details out as you go.
Yeah, I know. I feel like I know what my values are. and just kind of living by that and seeing where the wind takes me as long as I stick to that.
That'll never fail you.
Yeah. So just being bold, being vulnerable, being adventurous. I'm on the On Adventure podcast.
Yes, you are. Do you know anyone or know of anyone that you think that is extremely adventurous that you go, that's cool, I'd like to do what they're doing?
My friend Keegan, he's one of my best friends. He's at Liberty. I didn't name him, but I mentioned it earlier. He goes out and hikes a lot. He rock climbs like every day, which is insane that he has the time to rock climb every day. It's easy to look on social media and see like, oh, that's a really cool thing you did.
Yeah.
But he mentioned going out to Moab for spring break, and I don't know if it's still happening or not, but he just seems so willing.
Mm-hmm.
And I really admired that about him and like that kind of stuff, the adventurous trips and whatnot. And he told me a story about how like him and his friends were just like sitting in their dorm, and it was like 3 a.m. and they're like, you want to go on a hike? And he was like, sure. And they went on a hike at 4 a.m. and saw the sunrise. And I was like, oh, that sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, my friend Davin. I lead Young Life with Davin in Pittsburgh, North Carolina. Shout out Pittsburgh. He is kind of someone that I look up to in terms of pushing himself in the gym. And that's kind of like inspired that goal that I mentioned earlier. I worked out. I did like, I think it was arm day. So we were hitting like biceps, triceps, that kind of thing in the gym. This was, I think, a week before Thanksgiving, a couple weeks ago. And we were doing one exercise, and he does this like insane workout where he goes to failure every single set. It's tough. I could barely extend my arms for the next like 3 days. But we were doing this one exercise, and I got to the end of the set, and I felt like my bicep was just about to like come off of the, like it was hurting. And he was like, okay, do 5 more. I'm sorry, what? You want me to do 5? Like, I feel terrible. And you want me to, like, just that kind of mentality of just like, you've gone to your limit, now do more.
I think that's a cool mantra, actually. You can take that and apply it to anything you do in your life. Is you get to the end and you go, do 5 more.
Yeah.
Right. That's a really cool.
Like that kind of mentality that to me is like resilience and adventure. It's just like adventure with like your limits and
do the hard thing, get to the limit, then do 5 more.
Yeah. And I kind of along the same vein, just like with life, kind of going back to my analogy, if life is a marathon, I'm sure I haven't run a marathon, but I'm sure that anyone who has run a marathon can say that there's probably some point in that race where you're like,
you hit the wall
and you're just like, you got to put one foot in front of the other, just one step at a time. And I feel like doing 5 more and then just getting, next step. That kind of, I feel like those two go hand in hand. And that's the kind of mentality that I want to have.
I think that's a perfect description of the adventurous mentality.
Yeah.
The adventure mindset. I think at 19 years old, you've nailed it. You've shouted out all your good buddies. You've shouted out teachers. You've hit on all the wisdom that you've gathered in 19 years. So this far exceeded my expectations. I had high expectations for you. I think it's been a lot of fun. You know, we talk a lot. I obviously know all these stories and all your friends and all the things that you've done. You've given me like a new angle listening to you answer these questions in your own words.
That's the goal.
I think folks listening to this will be glad that they listened to the end.
Shout out to the On Adventure podcast. Should listen to every episode previous to this and every episode after this.
There's some good ones.
Yeah.
All right, Eli. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Thanks for listening. And I sincerely mean that because I'm extremely grateful that you choose to spend this time with me. I don't take it for granted, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you want more content like this, be sure to check out material on my website at ridgelinewealthadvisors.com. That's advisors with an ORS. And sign up for my monthly newsletter, The Money Trail Guide, which you can find on the blog page. Until next time, I hope you pursue your own great adventure.